Internet, thank you once again for joining me to talk all things vertical drama. And I have found one of the superstars of vertical drama to talk to, who's the amazing Luke Charles Stafford. I have my first question is are you called Luke or Luke Charles? Kind of what do people call you day to day?
Oh yeah. Well, I am kind of I'm just a fella. So Luke, I tell people, I mean, you can call me Luke. My full name, actual first name is Lucas, with a K. The Whenever I hear Lucas, though, I'm kind of like, oh, am I in trouble? Was my mom here? But
Yeah.
Charles is my middle name, and I decided to keep it and use it, just because I'm named after my grandpa, and he was just a really great example of like being a good man, and that really resonated with me. And when I started to do things professionally, I just had this itch in my back of like, I just want that name to be out there because of who he was and things. So some people call me Luke Charles. Some people call me Luke Charles Stafford. Personally, you can just call me Luke. Luke is the most personal and friendly and all that kind of stuff. So
I love that. I love that. Yeah, there's a family name with meaning that you wanted to carry on. That's such a really beautiful, actually. I love that. So talking about family, where did you grow up? Are you a city boy, country boy, suburb
yeah.
boy?
No, I grew up in a small town in Indiana, in the Midwest in the States. Anderson, Indiana. Just lots of, the culture back there is very much just morale, good people. I was absolutely not raised with a silver spoon in my mouth. My parents many different times struggled financially. We were in not a very dense population, but it was very dense in terms of quality of people. One of the things I feel very lucky about is, I came into a lot of contact with a lot of just great men. It's just a very specific thing that as I got older, I realized not everyone has that experience. Getting into the arts and acting and business and things like that, learning that and learning all of that was a big curveball. However, man, I wouldn't trade just the cement foundation of where I came from for really anything. Just men who man, strong morale, but it wasn't just talk, it was walk. And they really inspired me. And like I said, small town USA, everyone kind of knows everybody. You can't get away with nothing. Is that Bob Stafford's kid who vandalized that? I don't know. But very salt of the earth people. Very, very salt of the earth people. Actually, I on my 30th birthday, I committed myself to keeping a promise to myself, and I flew to England, and I rented a motorbike, as you call them, motorbikes, and rode a Bonneville motorcycle from London. Love me a Bonnie.
Yes, good taste.
Yeah. And I rode it from London. I rented it in London, and I rode it to Stafford, England, because my last name is Stafford and my bloodline goes there. So, and one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because I promised myself in my 20s I would do this. And I was 29 and 3 days away from turning 30. So I went there and I got to there's a Stafford Castle. And I got there at 29 and 364 days old. So I kept my promise. And I stayed the night. I rode through a storm. I mean, it was a 6-hour trek. And first time on the left side of the road. But the reason I'm bringing all that up for a random reason is because it reminded me of Anderson, Indiana. Like it got there and it was like as if you dipped my hometown in English roots. It was like, you know, just awesome. It was like, man, this reminds me of exactly it was a small town. Everyone knew everybody. The mayor found out that someone was in town, an American with his last name was Stafford on a motorcycle, and he came to the bar that I was at to meet me, and he goes, "Hello." He's just kind of like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, I own the joint, pal." So anyway, it was just a really cool experience for me, and it reminded me of an American version that I grew up with. So anyway, it's just a long-winded way of saying I grew up around some really quality people and learned who I wanted to be and what kind of man I wanted to become. And that's, I think, one of the few things that has lasted and followed me from that time. So
It's really interesting you saying about that you could see the parallels. So everyone knows, I think, probably watching this, that you are both actor and musician, very passionate about both. Can you date a first memory of each, of kind of the first moment that you were drawn to music, or possibly were somehow performing or doing a story?
you ask wonderful questions, I gotta say. I gotta just applaud you real quick. I'm not trying to fluff your feathers, but I mean it. That's a great question. It's such a powerful question. Did you come up with these questions yourself?
I just make them up as I go along. Just
Wow.
it's not enough prep. Sorry, YouTube. It's just in
No,
the
that's
moment.
great. No, I just those are really wonderful questions. I can actually. I appreciate you asking because it's fun for the mind to go back there, and it's very encouraging to me, to like remember. I remember when storytelling was the first thing. There was a magic to storytelling. I couldn't have penned it as storytelling. I couldn't have defined storytelling to you. I'm very interested in the pure state of a child, for example, because the experience is so raw and real with no definition or parameters. And that was my experience. My song Out of Time, actually, the beginning of the song talks about that. When I was a little fella, just a little squirt, I remember watching Superman with Christopher Reeve, the 1978 movie,
Yeah.
and I watched it, Jen, over and over and over and over. My parents, I had this, we didn't have a ton of money, but they were really wonderful in using it to try to create experiences. And they bought me a tent, like a child's tent, and I would put up the tent in the living room. And we had one of those box TVs, uh, and I remember just the VHS watching Superman over and over and over and over. And I was, words that I would use today, that I felt to describe it that I wouldn't have known to use then. I was enamored with just how I was swept away, and I didn't know what I was feeling, but I was so just enthralled with the story of this man who had a destiny and a purpose, and he became Superman, but who he was. And see, it's funny because fast forward to being an adult, and many of those principles have stuck with me, whether it's where I'm from or, all that stuff. But that left such an impression. It imprinted my soul and awoke things in me that I think were embedded. And as I didn't know it then, but that was really the seed. So it really started with watching Christopher Reeve play Superman. But it was the whole experience. It was the score, the John Williams score. I think I walk around my regular life just with John Williams and Hans Zimmer playing in my head
It's a
today.
good way to experience the world.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And but that was when I think back, I didn't realize it till I got older, but that was really when. Like if I think back, I was so enthralled with it. And then shortly after, but it was a whole experience. So music was in there, the way that I was feeling something by an orchestra that played something in 1977, and here I am watching it in 98, 99, and something that someone recorded in a far off land decades ago was reaching me in a living room in a tent. I got a little bit older and I was like, that what magic is this? You know what I mean? And Christopher Reeve's performance, I think when acting is done really well, we don't realize the person's acting. We forget that they're acting. When acting is potentially poor or less than satisfactory, you know, we might come out of it and go, that took me out. What was that? And you kind of feel the chair and you kind of realize like your real world comes back. But his performance was so great. And the same thing happened with Lion King. I remember watching Lion King over and over and just the whole experience. And then shortly after that, I have memories around that same exact time where my grandparents, they had, I'm not sure how it was in the UK, but they had these old refrigerators, just really old refrigerators, and like with all these magnets and things like that. And I remember Elvis was one of those magnets. And my grandma, she hadn't gotten sick yet. I remember she was like, oh, talking about, the king, like, I mean, she would like kind of like, and then the music, she would play songs. And like, I just remember being 3 years old, going through that whole experience. I was saying, with film and Christopher Reeve and Superman, but also Elvis. And it was like, I'm like, well, what's that magic? How can someone get on a stage, share a song? And then I heard Can't Help Falling in Love. And my little
Yeah.
brain couldn't understand the magnitude of, like, it's really pretty simple, right? Wise men
Mm.
say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Take my hand, take my whole life. You know, that whole thing. But even at 3, 4 years old, it was like something was powerful. And then those were the seeds. And I remember my grandma just those magnets on her old refrigerator, and they were dirt poor. I mean, that refrigerator was from probably like 1950. Like it was like, and you know, living in like just this small beat down house, and you know, I just remember all those magnets, and I remember she played Elvis, and I remember she played Jailhouse Rock, and I remember she played Can't Help Falling in Love, and I was just like, why am I feeling stuff? You know, it was like I wasn't mad at it. It was just like I was, what is this magic? You know, and then you know, you realize that the magic in the movie and the magic, you know, and it was just like I couldn't get enough of it. I was so just blown away by the power of, I came to find later, it was really storytelling. When I do music, and it's funny, and I try to encourage in other folks with these same things. It's like you make the best music, you write the best song, you perform the best monologue when something of your own soul is attached to it. And so versus trying to be like someone else or trying to be another artist or trying to be a different actor, like it's such a cliche thing to say that we've heard a million times, but no one can do it the way you do it better than you can. There's a
Yeah.
truth to that because it's like there's something very cinematic when I do music. I don't try to.
Mm.
I spent years trying to be like everybody else, and I really got nowhere, and nothing really started to really even work until I just stopped trying to do what other people were doing. I mean, you draw from other people. That's, you know, everyone has said the words "I love you" before, but why does it feel different when this person says it in this context? Why does that song? Everyone's done a minor 6 after a 4, you know, but why does it feel different when he does it? Or, you know, everyone's done a falsetto flip there. Why does it feel different? And for me, there's something about storytelling that just follows me in all of it. And I feel like, Jen, I feel like this might be not what you were asking, but I feel like
No,
honestly,
I have.
I'm
You've answered it beautifully.
yeah. Okay. I'm just giving you a whole book here. But
No, but you've beautifully explained, partly just because you've been so passionate of just how you fell in love with both
yeah,
of them. And I
it
really
keeps me in.
feel it's one of those things of how important almost family and those formative experiences were. That,
Oh
you
my
know,
gosh.
particularly, you know, would Superman have had the effect if you hadn't had that you're watching it in a tent and that also just heightened the moment and it was Superman and, you know, probably possibly all sorts of songs were playing, but it was the fact there was the magnet and it was the king, and then you heard that, you know, those specific Elvis songs. It's like almost like this magical congruence of things that just at the right age just totally inspired you.
No, yeah, I feel like I'm just here. I am in my early 30s, and I feel like I'm just starting in a way. Like it just it's all kind of clicking now. And I'm not talking about career success. I mean, like I think God for all these experiences that I really appreciate you asking me that have brought them up, but they're all kind of just everything's just starting to gel with kind of who I am and what I'm doing. I focus less on those things these days than I did in my earlier 20s. Back then, it was kind of like, I need to figure this out. I think there's, you know, there's a pressure of, you know, who am I? Uh, Let me figure this out. I- I've always felt that that's a largely, you know, American culture. I'm not sure how much that is in the UK, but I know that in my 20s, you know, when I realized what I really wanted to do, I was trying everything out, which is part of the process, but I was trying to do what everyone else was doing. And I was trying to be like them to find approval from people, you know? But man, it didn't really start to gel till, I know it's another cliche truth we all know, but when you really stop pursuing the validation of what people think about you, you know, there's something really natural and pure and strong and powerful that comes out of it. There's all, you know, there's all, and being comparable, when you compare yourself to other people too, it's like, I can't do what, Eric Guillemette does, and he's a good buddy, you know, like, I can't do what Noah Fernley does, and he's a good buddy, or Beyonce or Elvis, or it's like, but when you really lean into what makes you you, and you kind of stop thinking about everything else, I feel like I'm just been stepping into that the last few years, and I wish it was sooner because it feels good,
You're
So
doing good. That resonates for me so much. But for me, I took another 10 years. I think it took turning 40. And then, yeah, it's like, so you're doing
you're
good.
40.
You've got
Wait a
there
minute,
around 30. So you're good. I think it's a
you're
natural
40
thing.
years old.
Oh, I'm 45.
I'm not
It
trying
was
to fluff your feathers. That's a surprise. I did not. Wow, what filter
Well,
are you
yeah.
using? No.
Oh, no,
I'm
no.
sure you
I
don't.
have the brain of a teenager as well. That's partly
You
why
look
I'm very
wonderful.
juvenile.
My goodness.
Oh, well,
Wow.
thank you very much. But yeah, no, it is that. Yeah, I think the 20s are right. I think 20s, I think it's probably quite unique for someone to be that able to be that comfortable and confident in themselves. I think that's possibly a natural process. But yeah, that's amazing that you got there in the 30s. So, and it's brilliant, isn't
Yeah.
it? Because it's just so much easier because you're just a you. You don't have to be constantly thinking of like, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that?
Yeah, and
Kind
I
of
think we
freeing.
gotta always keep our eye on that because I think it's very human at the same time, especially, it's very human to start asking those questions again at times or feeling insecure. Insecurity is a part of life. They're there and in single digit years, they're there and all the way through, I think. But, I think that it also matters who we surround ourselves with, and it matters who we ultimately choose to be. But man, yeah, there's just such a piece of coming into your own skin. So I hope that my my efforts in acting and music and the arts, I'm always chasing and trying to harness that same power we've been talking about. When it's really, I think actors, singers, songwriters, anyone on a stage, anyone with a mic on a screen or whatever, I think we're at our best when we're servants, when we're serving, when it's really not so much about us. I think when we're serving the story, we're serving the song, right? I think, um, you know, that I think we're at our best when that happens. I don't, obviously, there's the whole bit, right? Like, it's very much about you, yourself, in the sense that, like, you are the face of that. You are the one singing the song. It's your song, you're a movie star, a pop star, like, there's whatever it is, but man, there's something so powerful when its reach is inexplicable or nonverbal, and it's reaching someone's soul, you know? And I think I chase after that because I can sleep well at night. I can always find a reason to be less fond of myself, you know? But man, dude, when I feel like that song meant something to somebody, or, that character, even if it's a bloody werewolf billionaire, it's like it made someone feel something. I personally, like, that's where my heart goes with it all, and it keeps me grounded. I think it's kept me safe in a way. It's like kept me in my own cockpit versus it's very easy to also get swept up away in the riches and all the sexy stuff. It's just human. But all the stuff that we're talking about is stronger in my soul, and it keeps me hungry despite how I feel or what I'm going through. It keeps me, like, wanting to keep coming back to it.
As someone who kind of obviously grew up and the love for the film and the music early on, was that always going to be, this is what I do with my life? Or was there a deviation in the path of sort of another route you could have gone down career-wise?
That's the best questions. No, it was definitely there, like, year 3, 4, like, but, I was in 5th grade going into 6th grade. I was quite overweight. I wouldn't have called it a career pursuit back then of, like, this is what I wanna do with my career, but the reality is, yeah, at that age, it was like, man, there's something to this whole storytelling thing. I just, and I was obsessed with all elements of it. But I tried out for my first musical, and I had a really pivotal experience, which I'm actually very grateful for. It's gonna sound negative, but I'm very grateful for it. I was really nervous, and, for the audition, you're talking about 5th grade kid. I was, again, overweight for my age, I was quite overweight for my age. No one knew, none of the other kiddos knew that I, was interested in that, and, because I grew up playing all the sports, doing baseball, and I still love it, I do all that stuff still. But when I came to, do Oklahoma, the musical, everyone was like, almost like, yeah, Oklahoma. And everyone was like, almost like, Luke, why is Luke here? And then I was so nervous that I had to sing in front of everybody that I just yelled the notes. I didn't even match a pitch. I just yelled the notes. And I remember the line was spinach and tomatoes. I just remember that's what I had to sing. And everyone laughed. I was told I was tone deaf. And, it was just like one of those, like you see it in a movie where everyone laughs, everything moves in slow motion, and I went and picked up a saxophone and poured everything into that horn. I barely practiced. I just had a very natural ability. And I don't know if you've heard any of my sax playing. Um, I did end up going on to have a professional sax career at one point,
Mm.
but that sax kind of harnessed the acting and the singing and all the stuff I've always wanted to do and am doing now got kind of put into the saxophone.
Mm.
And as I was going into college, I mean, I was trying to figure it out. I was like, man, I was dating a girl at one point. Then I almost went to Purdue University and got a PE degree to teach PE in high school. Like I was really uncertain, but I ended up going to a different school and I started out studying music education. I thought I'll be a band teacher, right? But it's interesting because if you go back all the way to 3, 4 years old, I stepped into college and I couldn't, there was this thing, man, I couldn't, it was like, it had been trying to come out of me since I was 6 years old up until 18, 19. And then you get in the right environments and you just can't take it anymore. And I just remember like I was 20, I think. And I remember losing a job. I lost a job. And one of those men in my life I was telling you about, he gave me a job as a worship leader at his church. It was a very charismatic black church. I was the only white guy. And very charismatic, very just, I mean, everyone was singing, everyone was dancing and singing. The guy who just left, he wanted to
Mm.
replace me with him, like could play piano and I mean, it was like, and I'm like just a 20-year-old white kid who plays a saxophone. And I'm like, hey, man, are you sure you want to hire me? And his words were, God told me to. And if he hadn't hired me for that job, because
Mm.
while I was doing that, I started singing and then I had done show choir. Like I was doing stuff, but I was really suppressing all this stuff we're talking about because I kept telling myself it's not for me. But while I was doing that job, it just started coming out of me like lava. And then I switched my major in college to music business. And I switched it again to doing a double major in business and music. And then I decided to add a theater minor. And the rest of my college experience was like me grabbing everything from 3, 4 years old. And then I got a job. I moved to LA after college. I was like, I wasn't fully like willing to say it out loud just yet. I was 23. But then I got a job on Broadway with a very interesting job. I was playing saxophone on stage in the musical and singing backup. And while I was there, I
Mm.
went homeless. It's a whole story. That's a whole story. But I went homeless and I was actually out of money because I was trying to pay down my college debt. So I was in a really unique period where I was on Broadway but had no money, sleeping on the F train, sneaking into the theater to go to the attic. And that whole experience, everything came to a head.
Mm.
And I almost missed curtain call.
Mm.
And because I woke up in the attic right before curtain call, flew down the stairs. The director saw me, realized something was wrong because I would go to the attic to sleep. And I had a dream that night, sleeping on the F train bench. And in that dream, I just realized what I needed to do. I can tell you what that dream was, but all this stuff just came to a head. And this is all the truth. I just like, I got to put the saxophone down
Mm.
and I got to go back to LA and I got to give this 150% of everything I got. And so I came back to LA, it's 2018, and I set the saxophone down. I stopped taking a bunch of professional jobs. I started working 4 other jobs, living in a house of 10 guys in LA, here in LA. Acting class, acting class, acting class, vocal lesson, vocal lesson, vocal lesson, this and that. And I had written songs. I was like hiding it through my teen years. And then that experience, it just set me off. And I started throwing everything I had at it. Everything that was in the saxophone, I realized was meant for this. It was where it was supposed to go.
Yeah.
I remember, and then it worked. It was like, it took consistent effort to kind of catch back up, so to speak, but my soul was alive,
Mm.
and I'd done a couple acting jobs here and there, but I hadn't given myself permission to really burn the plow, so to speak, to really just like, this is what I'm going to do with everything I have, act and make music. And fast forward a couple years, a year later, actually, did my first SAG job on Apple TV, and then, all the stuff. That's how I got there. So it was not exactly, it was always in me since I was just a little toad, 3 years old, but through my experiences, I didn't feel like I was allowed, you know? It was also encouraged to have a stable job, from where I grew up, which is totally fine, that's very wise. But through all those experiences, it really unearthed what was always there. It was always the dream. The shorthand answer is yes, it was always the dream, but I wouldn't have admitted that to you between the ages of 12 and 19. I just would have never said it. So anyway, that's how I got there. That's how I found the road back to me. So, and then here we are.
Oh, well, just thank you for sharing that. I think that's actually going to probably inspire a lot of people, I think. I have to ask then verticals. Obviously, you're in LA, you're working jobs, obviously presumably there through COVID and writer strikes and all that. When did verticals for you crash into your life? Because I know the first one was the billionaire bike one.
Taming the Lion. Yeah, I had an audition come in. I had just signed a new manager. This was 2024, top of 2024. The manager and I started working together. His name's Mitch. He's wonderful. Still my manager today. Incredible man, incredible guy, incredible manager. Can't say enough about him. I actually hired him because I was trying to get an audition to play Superman. That was my because that was my childhood dream, you know.
Yeah, understandable.
And I risked it all, dude. I gave it all, and we actually auditioned and made the list. It's a whole story, but I knew I needed to
They
find.
won't go blonde with Superman, will they? That's the problem.
Yeah, they dyed my hair.
You did good.
It,
Yeah.
yeah, no,
We had a blonde
David Ford.
James Bond. We can have a blonde Superman. I think it's fine.
That's right. I
Yeah.
agree. Jen, you tell him. You tell him.
Oh, well, there we are. Internet, I've just laid down the law. Come on, blonde Superman for the casting, please. Go to Luke.
Yeah, but I feel like that was. I didn't want to go to my deathbed without having tried, and I was the right age. I was 28 at the time. It just was like I can't. I got to find a way to swing the bat, and so I found Mitch through that process of auditioning new managers and trying to find someone because I didn't have the rapport to be invited to that space. So it was like, how could I do the impossible? Because I was just doing Lifetime movies at the time, and uh, no Lifetime actor is going to be invited to audition for Superman. So but that's a story I'll leave to the side for now, but that's how I found Mitch, and I looked at a bunch of different managers. I ended up hiring him, and sure enough, he got us in, and we got an audition, and it was just crazy. I cried like a baby when the audition came in. I dyed my hair black for the audition, by the way. Anyway, so that's how I found Mitch. Fast forward a few months later, this is how Verticals came to be. January 2024, an audition comes in, Taming the Lion. I didn't know it was vertical. There was nothing on the breakdown that made it clear that this is what the format was. To me, it was just another audition, right, for something. I noticed it was very soapy, very, those are things I remember. It was like, oh, this is very soap opera, very dramatic. Did the audition. This was unique, actually. In verticals, I noticed that the material was very just kind of two-dimensional. And I actually love the challenge of trying to create 3 dimensions from 2, just elevate the material or find something different and interesting that's not on the surface. And I remember I did the audition and I thought, I think this guy's a sweetie. He's written as like a, rough around the edges guy. And I certainly harnessed that or tried to, but I made sure to not hide his heart in the material. And none of that was in the breakdown of who he was. It just interested me heavily of underneath it, he's a sensitive sweetheart, you know? And they love that, you know? So they still got their sex appeal, they still got all the stuff, but there was something to him that was, like, underneath the hood, some layer. I get the job, it shoots in Atlanta. I fly to Atlanta, thinking, "This is great, man. Wow, fun," you know? And then I get there, first day one, Jen, I walk in, and, you know, it's your first time on a job, you don't wanna be that guy. You just wanna be easy to work with, make everyone feel comfortable, elevate the character as much as you can, go home, be on time. And I'm there, and I'm working up the courage to say something to somebody because 'cause I'm like, "The monitor is up and down. Like, why is the monitor this way?" You know? And I'm just sitting there because everyone seems professional. This other guy just got done working on Stranger Things, you know, and I'm sitting there, and I'm kinda right?
Everyone noticed that the
And I'm like,
monitors.
"These guys" yes, and, like, these guys are pros, and no one's noticed that the monitor's vertical? Like, you know? And so finally, you know, I just said, "Hey, yeah, how's your day going? You doing alright?" "Yeah." Yeah, and I just said, uh, "I think the monitor's up and down. Is that like a trick or something? Is that" like, I tried to give him benefit of doubt, like, maybe it's like I don't know, but I had done enough work at that point to know, like, I think that's a mistake, but I didn't say that. I was just like, "Is that like a trick for something? I'm just curious, like, what's the strategy?" And everyone laughed, and they were like, "This is a vertical. This is a vertical format. This is," you know. And I was like, "What?" And then from then on, it was like, "Wait, so this is like a TikTok movie?" But we shot it it's shot just like a Lifetime movie I've done before that, you know? But that's how I was introduced. And then very quickly after that, I saw where it was going. I met the people at Real Short, and it just took off, you know? But wow, that was my experience.
You made some absolute kind of huge hits, I think, for Real Short, particularly in 2024. You know, I mean, these are all ones, you know, I've loved, like You've Got Mail, Runaway, Princess Bride, Accidental, Surrogate for the Alpha, Werewolf One, Fake It Till You Love Me, and so on. Fried Chicken Flash Marriage, Marriage and Heartbeat. I mean, just all great ones. Was
I
there a
love those.
sense, is there one that you got the sense of that's when it took off? Kind of, is there one where you're like, oh, okay, this is, I guess maybe from like a fan response, maybe? Like the one, I guess it's
I have 2 answers. Yeah, that's a great question. So, when we did Taming the Lion is when I realized how dense the space was and how much was available in the space, how much opportunity, like, I remember doing it and, you know, I just remember the fan feedback. That's what I remember, and it was, like, thousands of people, and then hundreds
mm.
of thousands of people, and I saw, like, that got 20,000,000 streams. Like, I was like, "What?" And then but things that all these fans were just, like, all of a sudden talking about. I'm not saying Taming the Lion wasn't a huge smash in comparison to others. I just remember that initial. I realized what the space was. Like, this isn't just somebody's TikTok page. You know, this is a whole format with weight and merit to a fan base. It was because the feed I remember, like, things were a little different back then. You could post footage. Nowadays, the studios usually are a little more protective over the footage, but I remember, like, posting a couple clips, and I also got down to 5% body fat for that role, but I remember that whole thing of, like, you know, Leo having some layers to him. I remember the fans just eating it up. Like, they were just obviously infatuated with, like, his sex appeal, but they were just, like, so infatuated with my choice with the character, and just all these fans were just kind of the feedback was almost aggressive. Like, it was, almost obsessive. Not with me, but with, like,
People
that
love that
character.
character. Yeah, there's something about that
Yes,
character, you're right,
and I
that
was like,
people really, really identified with. Love.
"Yeah," but I know then I looked around and I saw, oh, you know, Eric, because Eric and I were friends before Verticals ever happened, and I saw he was doing and I saw same thing was happening to him, and then, you know, I started seeing other names pop up, and it was all during that Taming the Lion, and I was like, "Wow." So that was where I really remember the space, like, realizing what the space was. I would say the first vertical see, You Got Mail also, like, I remember the response to You Got Mail was just it stacked, but I think Accidental Surrogate was the one where I think I caught myself entering. I don't wanna self-label it that way. I'm gonna use this term, list, but I don't mean that in terms of, like, you know, I just mean, like, I caught myself being seen in the space as more of a name. Like, people knew who I was.
So once you've kind of had a few shows that have that many viewers, then you suddenly have that recognition of it's more than one. And then people are like, it's not just Leo. We love Leo. It's like, oh no, this actor we really
Right.
like. And
That's
then it sort of
exactly right.
transitions to like, okay, we want to follow him now. Like, what other projects is he doing? And I think that's what then takes it to that. You
You're
become
100% right.
yeah.
You could say the same thing for Noah, I mean, anybody. There's a bunch of names now, but I would also say briefly too that I did Accidental Surrogate, and then I got to do Runaway Princess Bride, which was the British one. I had this British accent. Don't hate,
Very good.
don't. Yeah,
You were
yeah.
fine. You did good.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I had a trained accent that I'd worked with on a coach from college, and I'd had some training with it, but that experience was awesome. I still think about that vertical. Just more for me personally, like, I loved playing Xander. I loved it so much because the accent, man. The accent was going to be a little bit more RP, so just modern. But then I met the actors playing my family, and they're also posh, just hit, spare. It's so, so that I was like, okay, see, this is where I nerd out. And maybe, I know not every actor is the same, but like for me, I take all the little stuff so seriously. Like I know they're not Oscar movies, but I certainly approach them like that. Like I remember thinking, okay, so the accent, so we don't want Xander to feel snobby because that's not him. However, he does come from a royal family, and the three of them were all, at the snare. And so I came away from just a good old RP, and I approached it with a little more of a posh accent. I just made sure he was chill. But we shot Accidental Surrogate. I had 4 days in between finishing Accidental Surrogate and shooting Runaway Princess Bride. And I spent 2 of those days working with a dialect coach, just kind of like pounding my brain with my accent of choice. I wish I had like a year with him, but I had 2 days. And then I went into the British accent with Xander, got a haircut, got more clean, more royal, did that vertical, and just fell in love with. To me, that's still one of my absolute favorites to this day,
See,
personally.
I think you perfectly encapsulated. Okay. Well, I think you write off creatives in the vertical space at your peril. Okay. So you had 4 days between 2 intense shoots, and anyone who verticals are a long day with a lot of, pages on script. But not only that, you had basically that time to transition accent. Now, obviously, if you're in a feature film, you've got months to prepare. You
Yeah.
read about people, they've been working towards a role, physically, about things, it's months and months and months. Like, you did that in that. I'd say pulled off a very decent accent because I did not note it. I only tend to remember the ones where I'm like, oh dear. And I mean, to be honest, you've got Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins, and anything after that is better. So you're all
Yeah,
good.
right.
It's like, I didn't
So
note it. I
good.
was like, this is all fine. And I mean, I want everyone on the internet to just take a moment of just the level that you guys are working at and the speed that you're like, and then you just have to do it. You haven't got hours to perfect it. You do it. And I just think that's partly, you've just encapsulated why I think you write off the talent.
Yeah. Speaking of the larger space as a whole, you're exactly right. And it's very easy for things to fall flat that are not even at the actor's discretion. It would be very valid if I came in and sucked, you know,
Mm. Yeah.
because it's like, how do you're an American. And usually with Americans, there's, from what I understand, you're the one with the actual British accent here. It's easier for someone with a British accent to go into an American accent versus a lot of American performers. You can tell that that's not their actual accent when they do British or any, type of. And I was so obsessed, Jen, with like, I'm gonna fight that. I really should have said no. Like, I was so tempted to say no to the role because I'm like, God, I've got 4 days in between. And I was on set for Accidental Surrogate trying to find a dialect coach, you know? That
Yeah.
famous scene where I say that's my pup and I can smell him. That day, right before that shot, I was on the phone trying to find an accent coach. And I turn around and I do that. Yeah, so fun little fact, like when that shot was taken, just 10 minutes prior, I was in a green room, like on the phone with a coach, so it's fun to think about that. But yeah, as a space as a whole, and I think, man, the reps are insane. Like if you really take it seriously, you can really grow your craft in this space if you use it for that. A wise man I heard once say something when I was just a little squirt. He said, "Take the job seriously. Take your work seriously. Just don't take yourself seriously." That's kind of always stuck with me. Like, I'm just a fella, I'm just a guy, I've found a new friend here on my phone, we're talking, and that's kind of, the extent of where I go. But man, what can I do to honor Xander? What can I do to, like, what's interesting? Am I listening to that other act? Am I actually listening? Or am I just waiting for my line? Am I responding? I've gotten in trouble. The listeners might like to know this. I've gotten in trouble for changing dialogue a lot, and not because I'm trying to, but because, like, the dialogue is written for clickbait, and it should be. That's the format. But something will slip out of me that's more natural, like a little more humanistic, and it sometimes is like, oh, that's really not the line even at all. So then I'm sorry, I do that again and say that, you know. So I've gotten in trouble at times for changing dialogue. I'm not trying to, it's just more like
You're in the zone, aren't you? You're in the character, you're in the moment, so I can
trying
see
to
why. Yeah.
trying to get it human in a way. Um, yeah, I just feel like it's a really great space to be in. There's so much opportunity. I'm very lucky that, the timing was right, and Taming the Lion came up when it did. Because now it's huge, and there are thousands of actors, trying to get into the space. Hundreds of thousands. I'm very, very blessed and very lucky. Obviously, I enjoy working very hard, but I understand that the timing was also right. And so I'm very grateful for that. And I don't take an ounce for granted about that at all, you know?
You've kind of touched on it beautifully there, the sort of the thing I wanted to ask you next before we go on to your most recent project, which is obviously over 2025, sort of it's seen this exponential growth, particularly in America. It's sort of gone from being an underground thing to, you'll see people watching verticals. Uh, it ended with, a huge amount of press and interviews and People magazine and all sorts of things like that. I guess for you, have you had a moment during that year where you've gone, this is now broken out into the mainstream? Is there any moment you personally identify? And I guess just what are your reflections on sort of what's happened?
My gosh, I've got a few. The ones that are most powerful are, well, I'll give you one personal, one professional. Personal one was I was on set and my dad texted me. Man, it can make me cry if I think about it. My dad has, he just sacrificed so much when we were growing up. And I didn't know until I was an adult just how much he did. I think the greatest role that I will ever play is being a father. And I know it's kind of old school to say, but I I think it's the hardest job being a parent, but it's also, I think, the most important it can be. And just what he sacrificed, what he went through. And I get a text from him. I'm shooting this is in 2025. This is last June or July. I'm shooting another vertical with Brittany Prizzioli. We're doing a chef one. And I get a text. And my dad, he never got to go overseas or do anything like that but he had a job that he actually had to go to Japan. And it was this whole thing. Like, it was a big thing for him. I was like, oh my gosh, Bob Stafford's going to Japan. It's like this whole thing. It was so cool and kind of cute too. It was just like, it was awesome. I was like, well, he gets there, and some of these people who are hired to work for him, they like notice him. And there's all these like people who are kind of like talking behind his back, and dad's like, what the heck? They work up the courage and they go up and they have a screenshot of Married in a Heartbeat. And they say, Bob's son, they call him Bob's son, Bob's son, is this your son? Is this, whatever? And dad was just like flabbergasted that here he is in Japan, and the whole team of like men and women, like predominantly women, but they were like, is this your son? And I get a text from dad, and shares his story. And he's there in a picture of them in Japan. And that was a very personal moment. And I was on set. I was crying. It's just like, I, I, I want my father to see as much as I can do. I just want him to see it. before he passes, before he leaves this world, because I want him to see his investment. If I ever have to cry in a scene, I use my father. I mean, you can tell it's just right underneath. Uh, I believe in method type of acting. I studied it a lot and done a lot of different, and I can always pull a cry and shift the energy of that cry if I focus on my dad. And that was a very personal, profound, but I just realized I was like, what is this space, man? And then right after that, the professional example was I was auditioning for a network TV show. And I made the top 5. I didn't get the job. Actually, it was Michael Bergen. Noah got the job, but I was in the running.
Yeah.
And I
Noah
just realized
Furley. Yeah.
Noah Farley. No, he was perfect for it. I'm honestly he's he looks like he perfect for it. But I was in the running for it, and someone from the production, they were like, "My wife watches your vertical shows." And this is like someone in Ryan Murphy's office. And here I am. And in my head, the reason I'm sharing this example with you is because they were very separate. It was here's Vertical World, here's all the main stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this is the moment I'm standing in the office and it's like, you what? You know what I mean? So, and he's like, yeah, my wife watches all your shows. That werewolf one was pretty cool, man. And I was like, thanks. It was like, here I am, in Ryan Murphy's office being talked to about the verticals by one of the producers and how his wife watches them and he knows who I am as a result. That caught me. And then there's a few other experiences too, but that's when I really like in my own world felt like, oh my gosh, this is really captivating people all over the world. And it's grown a lot from Taming the Lion and top of 2024 to mid 2025 or whenever that was. And yeah, so I just, and then I would say as well, just the fan reach. The other experience I've had has been like, it's no secret that I'm putting my music out there, and if it wasn't for the vertical space, it wouldn't be reaching as many people. But that's just like the fact that it is translating. It just all those things are like, man, this really is a serious space to consider, you know. So
I want to say thank you for those stories, and they're brilliant because they just give that context. Because you can look at something and go, oh, well, okay, apparently loads of people watch Married in a Heartbeat around the world. That's great, but it doesn't really mean anything. But then when you get that human thing of like, people in Japan going, no, we've watched it and now we want to talk, to your dad about it. And again, the same of like, oh, I know some people in America watch it, but then to have, no, I'm a TV person and my wife watches these. Yeah,
mhm.
you need that human story to get the context of how big it's got.
Yeah, because it felt so separate. Like, in fact, I have no problem saying this to you, and I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way of the vertical space. But there was initial concern entering the vertical space of, will this hurt entering the network space? Like, will this potentially turn off those casting directors, or not? It's still the Wild West. Like, it's still, we don't fully know where it's going, but we see where it's come. And at the very early stages of when I got started, there was that question. And I just kind of had the belief of like, you know what? There's an old saying called, the bird in hand or something like that. And I was like, this is the bird in hand. This is the opportunity that's in my hand. I'm going to make
Yeah.
the most of it and do my best with these roles, even if some of the writing's not Shakespeare. How can I make something emotional? How can I? And I'm glad that I did that. Because back then we just weren't sure, but it is translating. You know what I mean? It is being taken seriously, So in terms of being a business and the space being a lucrative space, and, you know better than anybody. Like, it's crazy to see where it's come from.
So I want to finish by asking you questions about Backstage Romance for the Pop Star, because it is something fans have said, why aren't there musicals? There need to be music,
Yeah.
We need music. Then we have you, who obviously is the double talent. I can act, but also I have bring the music. Please, could you talk a little bit about the genesis of how that project came about?
Absolutely. So I think it's no secret that I've been exclusive with Real Short during my tenure in vertical. And a couple years ago, I mean, it was pretty out of the gate. I was like, "Hey, we should do hey, brother, we should do music."
Yeah.
So I think I was mentioning it even back during, like, You've Got Mail and Accidental Surrogate. I was like, "Hey." So I mentioned it back then, and I've been, pushing for it since then,
Mm.
and Real Short's wonderful, and I don't think it happened in the past just because it was a bit more of a risk, it's like, "Well, this is what works," "So we need to keep making what works." And, but I kept bringing it up. I'd send the occasional email and and then I was putting out my music and this and that. I released a song called Just a Little, which to me is like kind of the ultimate love song and Real Short. So that was the first part. Then the second part was I released that song and Real Short did a podcast with me and they had me do a live performance and I brought in a band. I did a performance of, you can see it on my Instagram, a couple clips of it, but it's on YouTube still. But that was the first time on their there was a live performance of music, you know, and, the fans were just eating it up, and so, I waited a little bit, but then I brought it up again. I'm like, "Hey," you know what I mean? And because now there's a little more and I also knew in my heart that somebody's gonna do this,
Yes.
and, I
I
didn't
want to
care
be one
about
of the ones at the forefront. I'm not watching other people go past me.
Yeah, I keep mentioning this. Someone's gonna do it, and they might lip sync to someone else's voice or this and that. But like, we can skip past hiring a music department because that'd be new for you. We can skip right to here are the masters to well polished songs. Call me biased, but well polished songs. Professional audio where you don't have to go to the studio and figure that out and make and also, it also ensured that I'd be comfortable with it too, because I also got to make sure that I'm comfortable, whatever the music is, that it's a certain quality too. And since it would be the first, it was like that was my only concern was not that Real Short couldn't pull off quality, but that since it's the first, sometimes it's almost inevitable the first time that quality suffers. But I was like, this is you skipping past all that. And so I just pitched it a couple more times. So now we're a little over a year in to me mentioning it. And then later last year, I think it was around July. Okay, so a little over a year of me, mentioning it. Uh, yeah, a year and some months. I sent another email, and it's me following up. And I just kind of was a little more bold with it, and I just said, "Hey, it is the truth." I was just, and Real Short's wonderful, man, because it wouldn't exist without him. And I just said, "I really think we need to do this." And it was more like, you know, we need to do this and I'm being serious about it. And it just had a little more of that tone to it. Very grateful, but at the same time, I sent all this visual aid. I was like, I even sent a script outline that I made. Like I sent a story. I had a 10-page script that I'd already created. Like I was like, and then it got approved and they went and they made their own story. So they could, they got an algorithm, they got a fill and all that stuff and it got greenlit and there we were. And that's kind of how it happened. We did a publishing deal. So they got the rights to 4 of my singles, which are the only 4 that are my original, all 4 of my originals that are currently out. 3 of which were out at the time. The 4th came out the night before the movie, which is also like the Grammys portion of the film. Kind of the peak of the movie is that 4th song that came out. And I gave them my masters, and they also were very kind and involved me in a bit of the creative process too, just in terms of they did with it what they wanted. I gave them the rights to that, of course, but I was able to help just facilitate and give my opinions on certain story beats and things. And then we went and shot it in Vegas in December, and then it came out about
You
a month
shot
ago.
it in Vegas.
Yeah.
Having
Why?
told me the Elvis thing, you shot it in
Yeah,
Vegas.
yeah, 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 yeah. That was
That's
the
just
whole thing. Yeah.
perfect. Sorry, that's just made
It
me
was
so
awesome.
happy. So happy. Yeah.
And so it was very meaningful to me. It was very, very meaningful to me. And I even took a moment before we started shooting to just speak to the whole crew and just say, hey, this is something that, you know, we've been talking about for a long time. And I just want you to know that this is, for me personally, seeing a dream come true. And I just want you all to know, I know we do these sets, feels like all month, every month. I just want you to know this one's more near and dear and it means a lot to me that you're here. And it was so fun to combine them all, to put it all together and to merge kind of everything I am passionate about into one thing. It was awesome, So, yeah.
Were you always clear in your head which songs should be there? Was that always really clear? I mean, I completely understand obviously what you're saying about Just a Little, because, that is, I think a lot of people adore that song so much. So I can understand that you're like, that has to be there. But kind of how easy was the process of the other ones, of kind of these are the ones that fit, these are the ones I want to showcase in this way? Because I understand that it is a little bit of it's like a child almost, isn't it? It's like, yeah, it's quite a big thing to like go, actually, I'm going to put this here and link it to this. Just it feels like that could be quite a big creative decision.
I think so for me that the easy part was I had so much vision for it that the hard part was also going, but this is yours real short. So for me it was kind of the opposite. Like I had ideas for days. And that's something about me too, Jim. Like folks who know me personally, they kind of they tease me because vision and ideas, like I kind of a visionary maximizer kind of guy. Like I've got like my music video ideas, my films. I'm producing 3 movies of my own right now that I've written. I've got like I just have vision for things. So for me, like it was clear out of the gate, my recent song "Against the Wall," I wrote a music video for it, and then I realized very quickly this is a film. So then now it's gonna be a 10-minute short film. And like I struggle with, like, taking the smaller bite because I have an idea that I'm very moved by. So with, the Pop Star movie, I had a whole idea of, like, these are the songs where this is where they should be, this is when it should happen, I kinda came in with all that to the point that it was more like, "But please do what you wanna do." Like, I had to make sure to kinda get out of the way. But yes, so as a result, like, I think my most popular song out of the 4 is Still Missing You.
Mm,
That's the first original I put out, and Just a Little is a sequel to that.
mm,
So we're producing a film right now. It'll be a 15-minute short film that we're going to take to the festival circuit. And it's a movie that I wrote, which is Just a Little. And it's a sequel to the music video of Still Missing You. So if you watch the Still Missing You music video, Just a Little, the film, is a sequel to that music video. Because there's a narrative that I wrote, there's a whole story, there's acting, there's stunts,
mm.
but Just a Little is gonna be a full movie where there's dialogue and scenes, and then the song does happen. Um, and so with the musical vertical, I just like the narrative of Still Missing You and Just a Little, they go hand in hand,
Mm,
just the way that they were written. So I knew right away, like,
mm.
you gotta have those 2, you know? And then, Out of Time is very cinematic, and it's very like the clock is ticking, there's something stressful about it, and so my brain just kind of sees how there's an overarching narrative. Like he loses the girl here, that's Still Missing You, right? He gets her back at the very end, that's Just a Little. So like you see the thread, and Out of Time happens when he thinks that he lost her and she cheated on him, because he's in pain. But Against the Wall is a really cool pop song where of overcoming, so like that needs to be the thing that sets up the finish, so it just kind of I saw how it all goes together, and
That
Real
makes
Short did
sense.
too,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And I think the thing as well is obviously the brilliant thing is we have lots of saxophone, which
Yeah.
I think it's just brilliant. The saxophone comes over. And I was asking my teenagers, I was like, I mean, I'm sorry, I've touched Luke. I was like, saxophone. They said saxophone's back. They said there's a lot in Ray and Olivia Dean. A lot of saxophone.
Yeah.
Like saxophone's
Yeah.
having a resurgence at the moment. So I love that you work that in as well. Because, yeah,
Yeah. It's
just a little
I
big
have
up
to.
saxophone.
It's another way of speaking for me. I like it was my voice for such a long time
Mm,
that, it's like having your first car,
yeah.
and saxophone was the first vehicle that I had to
Mm,
express myself like this.
yeah.
The acting and the music was and the singing and all that was inside of what was the saxophone. So using the saxophone is like I feel like I'm speaking a different language, but I'm talking, you know? So
I have to ask as well. I feel like we've gone very deep. So I want to go a little bit shallow, if
yes.
that's all right, Luke, which
Get
is
shallow. Go to the
okay.
surface.
Yeah, we're going really to the surface with this question. Obviously, Dexter is a big pop star. Which means you have to do the pop star outfits, and there are some good pop star outfits. What was your favourite look or fit? What was
Oh
the
yeah.
one you're like, this one is pushing it, and I love it?
Dude, they did a great job. I really liked the Grammys outfit, the leather pants, the white silk shirt with the open, chest. Shaved my chest for
Prince, little Prince,
yeah,
that
a
one.
little bit of Prince in it. Yeah, a little Xander was in there.
Yeah,
I loved the glove, the one leather glove. We kind of found that together. Like that was something where like in the fitting, I was like, "Ooh, what if we?" And I was like, "Oh yeah," and maybe just I just love that.
yeah.
And then I would also say um that very final outfit, like that kind of baggy
It's
golden
just
shirt
golden shirt. Yeah.
was really cool. And the fitting, I remember, so the studio really wanted to go rock star with it. The original title was actually rock star. And
Okay.
I was the one who sent a well thought out message to the producers saying, "Hey, I think it should be pop star." Because the songs are really not rock, you
Mm,
know. They're like epic pop, you know.
mm.
And I also told him too, I was like, also like a rock star is kind of like the way of the past. Like the modern day music icon is really a pop star versus like, back in the 80s or something, a rock star was the equivalent. But today it's the so originally it was a so there was a lot of overtones with rock star,
Mm.
and then they ended up keeping a lot of that wardrobe, like that black leather jacket. I actually have that black leather jacket. They let me keep it.
Very cool.
Um yeah, it's
Excellent.
right over there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, but the film that we're making with Against the Wall, I wear that jacket in the film just as a nod to Dexter, and then I actually hired. We just finished filming, so my costume and makeup department, I had them recreate Dexter's tattoo and the earring. So just as a nod to the
A
vertical,
little, a
basically.
little Easter egg. I love
Yeah,
that.
exactly. So
I have to ask. I always ask this question because I get obsessed. So I think it's a really clever plot point early on of like the peril is introduced by crazed fans because crazed fans come in and make poor Dexter choose between the two ladies. But one of the crazed fans has a t-shirt with your face on, which I love.
with a gun, holding a gun
Yeah.
at the person. Yeah, yeah. I'm like,
And you're like, I'm not quite sure where your logic is here. Like you
yeah,
love
yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm also going to.
Yeah.
I want to know what happens to the t-shirt that has your face on saying Dexter.
It's actually in my laundry. I kept one.
Yes, you got the
So,
t-shirt. That makes me happy.
I've got yep, yep. I asked, like, "Can I take one of those?" So, they were like, "Yeah, we're just gonna get rid of them." I'm like, "Okay, well, let's, can I have it?" So,
It's just a cool, fun souvenir, isn't it? I think. Yeah, I love that.
it is a super cool, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, man, there was another scene that same scene, production got all these they wanted all these pictures of me, of my own artist stuff. So I sent them, like, 50 pictures thinking they'll use, like, 5. They used all 50. So if you watch the scene, you see all these pictures of, like, my actual, catalog of my artist shots and stuff,
Yeah.
and it's all over the room, and it was fun to be there and, like, walk in, it's just all these it was cool because, the childhood dream, the child in me got to live out some of those, a very personal just, like, dream I have is I would love to sell out Madison Square Garden. That's
Mm.
just it's just a very worldly thing that I just would love. Like, that's just, like, a dream in my head is just, like, how amazing it would be to hear those stands singing "Still Missing You" back to me. Just,
Yeah.
like, the fact my
Yeah.
soul would feel like, "Man, this song reached to these people," and just a stadium of so I've always had that dream since I was just a little fella,
Mm.
and so doing the vertical was fun because in a way I got to kinda experience what that would be like, and, it was fun, you know what I mean? So,
I think that's the thing about it. It is delightful. It is joyous. It's a joyous vertical. And I think your passion and love and for the music just comes across. I mean, that final episode, I think it's one of the best final episodes in Vertical. It's just basically
thank you.
music and joyous. So congratulations on a
Thank you so much.
super
I really
project.
appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm glad to hear that's coming through because that was what we wanted. That's what we hoped for.
So, final question, and thank you so much because we have yapped, as I call it. We've yapped a bit because
You
you've been
guys for being
amazing.
so long-winded.
No, no,
I get
it's me.
excited. Your questions are so good, and I just start talking, and I'm so sorry. You should meet my dad, though. You think I'm a talker?
I want to. I would be
You talk to
honoured.
you talk to Bob Stafford, man.
I
First
know
of all,
I get all the
you'd
good
have so
stories.
much fun.
I'm just like now thinking of all the questions I want to ask him.
Yeah.
So, final question is, yeah, just I guess a peek into what 2026 is looking like for you. You've kind of mentioned a few of the projects, but yeah, kind of where are you focusing this year and anything people should sort of be on the lookout for?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot going on. I've got a bunch of projects of my own that are moving forward. I've got more verticals lined up. I'm not sure how much I can say about those just yet, but there are, I'm very fortunate that there there's a lot of interest in the vertical space currently still. So there are verticals, I'll say that. But I don't know if I can share what they're about just yet because I would hate to get in trouble.
I think it's mainly just it will reassure people that you will be returning to
Yes,
their mobile
yes.
phone soon. So
There
that's
are
what we're doing.
projects on the way
Do not
in the
worry,
vertical.
people, they're coming.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think I can say this last we just finished one, and I play a Marine, and first time doing that. The story doesn't really focus on the Marine as much as it does about the female character, but my character is a Marine. We see him as a Marine. He's in a coma. He wakes up from a coma. She saves his life, and then I'll just leave it there. But and so that one's coming. Very excited about that. A couple more verticals. There's a vertical that I think folks will be excited to see because it'll be an ensemble. So you'll see me in with a couple of other faces, which I haven't gotten a chance to do anything like that yet, where you see not just my face but another guy that you know. And we shoot that at the end of this month. And then I've got my next song coming out in about a month. I've got the film for Against the Wall that's in post production right now, and the film for Just a Little, which is in post production right now. Both of those, the films, I wrote the films. I directed the films, and I act in them, and they use my music. And so my character will perform my song in those films. That is onto a greater goal I will share. So I'm using those as festival films. I do believe in the stories pretty strongly because I think at the end of the day, if you're going to make a film, it's got to be about, I think the story is king, right? It's not, about the other stuff just yet. It's about the story. And I really believe in the power of those stories. Like I could go on, that could be a whole podcast just about what the stories are about and the profundity and just what I hope people feel, especially Just a Little. Like I said, it's a sequel of Still Missing You. And if you've watched Still Missing You and feel something from Still Missing You, Just a Little takes it up a whole new level. And so I'm very excited about those because obviously, like, on the surface, it's fun. I'm putting, and that's, I'm combining acting and music. I also wrote and directed them. They are my songs I perform, but I really believe in those stories. So the goal with that as well is obviously to release them to the public for their enjoyment. And then the festival run, the goal is to gain the funding because all those separate stories are a part of a much larger script that I've written where it's a 2-hour feature film. And so my goal with the festival run is to get the funding to produce the 2-hour feature music movie, which would feel a lot like if you ever saw A Star Is Born with Bradley Cooper,
Yeah.
it would feel very similar to that, and just in terms of like music and movie. But it'd be a 2-hour feature that we would try to get landed on Netflix, HBO, give it a theatrical run, But the way to get there, there's a few ways to get there, but the way that I'm taking our team with it is that these are all proof of concepts that have festival runs, and in the festival run space is where you can get the funding to say this is a taste of the feature,
Mm.
right? Would you be interested in putting your money behind this to make the film? And so, because there is a 2-hour feature that combines all these different stories into one central narrative. So, and then we would go make that movie, and so, and that would be I can't reveal too much about the narrative, but I can say that would be like a epic action music romance
Excellent.
where, yeah, I can say that.
I like that
So
you've added the word action in because I do like a bit of action as well.
there's and Against the Wall, we shot a crazy motorcycle stunt and that proof of concept, and I'm gonna release these as short films that'll
Ooh,
function as the music video for those
yeah.
songs. So it's like basically releasing a short film music video, just so that way it's like, here's that for that song, take a look, right? But then for the folks who really love the music, but then I'll take those little movies and try to make the bigger movie with it. So anyway, I'm very excited
And back
about all
to that
that.
word that you used earlier, I think vision. There's a vision, and I love it. And I wish you all joy and success with it, I'm sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Regardless of where it goes, I believe in the story. And if for some reason it doesn't move past, you've got these really cool movies that I've made, little short movies that are, 8-10 minutes long. But if that means something to somebody right there, then I've done my job. Like if that moves somebody's soul, then I'll die happy. you know?
And just to say, you have moved a lot of people already with a lot of your work. You're just you're adding to the impact you have because, yeah, there's brilliant roles. I want to say thank you to you because you have been beyond generous with your time and just sharing insights into your thoughts and process. You are the very best, and I appreciate you hugely. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
No, thank you. And if you're watching this far, please give Jen a follow. Vertical Drama Love. She has been a force to be reckoned with in this space. And there's a big reason I wanted to do this chat and this hangout, this interview, just because we get a lot of interview requests, but Jen has been there since the beginning when I first just got started, and I've watched every time I get to see what she's doing. She's really paving a way for the space. She's making sure that the actors are being known, and she's putting such a spotlight on them in a way that feels very organic. It reminds you of like when a family member kind of wants to brag about you in a way, and it just feels very, yeah.
You should see my face if people diss the vertical on it. Don't you attack my family. It's like,
Have you talked to Jen?
yeah, I know.
She's gonna
It's like,
kick
just
your
put me
ass.
out there.
Yeah, yeah,
Who do I need to talk to? I'll sort them out for
yeah.
you.
So thank you is my point. Thank you. Seriously, genuinely.